Hello YouTube and everyone else. My name is Eddie. I'm a Cyber Scott. This past weekend I went to a regional in Philadelphia and there were 655 players. It capped at 655, which means that at least 200 were turned away, which is quite a lot for a big event like that. So it was a total of 10 rounds of Swiss. And throughout the day I went 7 wins, 3 losses. So, made 57th out of 655, and invites were handed out top 64, so I got my invite. Yeah, let's go into the profile. So, first off, we have, for our starters, we have 3 Bakari, best normal summon in the game, or my deck, I should say. 3 Chi-Chi. So, Chi-Chi searches the level 4 Laura Aggregator monster. Bakari searches an AI spell trap card. The other effect about him is if he's in the graveyard and one of your Cyber monsters battles at all during a damage step, you can banish this from your graveyard and destroy your own Cyber monster. So if there is a moment where you're about to take damage for a game or whatnot, you can banish this to save yourself. And because it's damage step, they can't get a replay. Bakari's other effect is to make anything a level 4 that's an Agnister monster. Comes up when you have an arrival token, you can make it a level 4 to make an update chamber. It makes any of your other Adignisters a 4 to overlay for Light Dragon. So there's a lot of different plays, so self-explanatory. Then we have 3 Sign Up Mining and 3 I Meet You. 1 card search spell, you reveal a Cyberburst for 2300 attack in your hand or extra deck. You search your deck for an Adignister with the same corresponding attribute. For the remainder of the turn after it resolves, you're locked into Cyberburst effects. And if you don't summon the monster you're revealing to activate it, the one with 2300, not the monster you summon, you take 2300 damage during the end phase if you don't summon it. And then Sign Up Mining, self-explanatory, discard a card for cost, search deck for level 4 Lord Cyberburst. Can't play under Shifter, just a heads up. Next for the extenders, the other Adignisters. 1 Doyan, 1 Bururu. Doyan is recursion, and summon targets an Adignister, add back to hand. If it's linked off, you target an AI spell or trap card, add that back to your hand. And Bururu, if it's sent to the graveyard, do Foolish at any Adignister monster. And if you synchro summon, you target any of the non-tuners, as long as it was for Cyber synchro monster, and you summon that non-tuner back. So it comes up when you negate Splash Mage, or negate a monster with Splash Mage's effect. Then we have 1 Hiyari, 1 Gachiri, and 1 Damari. Hiyari, if you control an Adignister, you can summon it from your hand, and you contribute 1 other Cyber monster to search your deck for a level 5 or higher Adignister monster, so one of these 2, make her level 4, and then if you search one of these 2 and you tribute a Cyber Slink monster, you can make that, you can also search the ritual spell Eyes Ritual. Gachiri, one of the best cards in my deck the whole weekend. So it's got 3 effects. First effect is, the first time any of your Cyber monsters would be destroyed by a card effect, it's not. It has each of them, so it applies for every single one. Then the other 2 effects are, if it's in your hand, you can target any Cyber monster you control, negate its effects, then summon it from your hand to your field. So if that monster gets negated, it stays in your hand. And then the other effect is, if it's sent from the field to the graveyard by any means necessary, you target any monster you control and make it unaffected. There's been times where I've dropped this to go for my full combo, and then into Beer Me, and now I have a huge token that's now unaffected until the end of the opponent's turn. So, this card comes up in a lot of different scenarios. More extenders, we have 2 of the Reborn spells. Idle Reborn, quick play spell card, it's target Adignister, summon it, for the remainder of the turn, your Cyber's locked. And the other effect, if it's in your graveyard and 2 monsters are declaring an attack, you can banish this from your graveyard and a card from your hand. Target any AI spell or trap that's either graveyard or banish, except this one, and then add back to your hand. So it's definitely good for recursion if they banish your island, or if you have a card that you want to get back like this. Speaking of which, this one is the other Reborn spell. Just a normal, target any Adignister in your graveyard, summon it back. No Cyrus lock attached to that. If your Adignister with 2300 or more attack would be destroyed by card effect, you banish it from your grave instead. And then if this gets banished by any means necessary, you can activate the effect where all your Adignisters with 2300 or more attack can be destroyed by the battle for the rest of the turn. This doesn't apply for the Arrival, by the way. So if you link summon the 6000 Arrival and you banish this, it does not affect it. Alright, next up we have our lovely field spell, Adignister Island. We're playing 2 copies and the 1 copy of Eye Contact. If you have a copy of the field spell, you reveal a second copy in your hand, put it to the bottom of your deck, and draw 3 brand new cards. And an island, if you have striker conditions where no monsters in the main monster zone, you can summon a level 4 lower adding-lister, but for the rest of the turn, you can't summon that same attribute by this effect of the turn. And if it's in your graveyard at all, you banish the adding-lister or reset it, but it's only once per turn you can do that. Onto the hand traps. We have 3 infinite impermanents, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs, 3 Ghost Bellum Haunted Mansion, and 3 Joel Leopard, which is a really good card coming in the next format, so get your Joels now, people. Those hand traps came up quite often. I feel like I should have had Nibiru main deck more, but nobody really nibbed me at a point where it really hurt. And if they did, I had a Reborn spell to get Doyan back, and I just made an IP with a Reborn spell set, because I can get back to Reborn with Doyan. So it didn't really bother me. Never really came up. For our combat, other hand traps, I should say, cards, we have 3 Cross-Eyed Designator, 2 Triple Tactics Talent, and 1 Call by the Grave. This one, you just declare a card name, banish the same copy of the card from your deck, negate the effects. There were 4 times this card came up. So good. Like, insanely good. My opponent tried drolling me, cross it out. My opponent tried nibbing me, game 2, cross it out. There was a time where my opponent went he was going second, and he had Triple Tactics Talent in hand. I crossed out my own tactics from deck and stopped that. There's a lot of applications for this card that people just don't realize, and I think it's a really good card personally for this deck, because if you want to combo off in a droll heavy format, you need these 4 cards to stop it. This is also good as well. I think I want a 3rd copy for this deck main deck, because if you have it for this main deck, you can just look at your opponent's hand if you get drolled, and at that point you have knowledge of what they have, so you can better prepare for anything that you might be able to come against. So it's like, all right, you have this, and this combat. You have an idea of what to go against next turn. It's also good to take your opponent's monster and make an IP or an SP if you really want to, especially if you're not cyber select. Oh, I gave away the secret tech. We'll get to that in a second. Speaking of which, we're going to go over all of the Cybers monsters in the extra deck now. Mostly Cybers monsters. So for our Link ones, we're going to start off with our Link 1 that's searches our field spell, Dark Infant Adding-lister, which we play 2 copies of. On Link Summon, you search the deck for Ignister Island, and if it's if a Cybers with 2300 attack, original attack I should say, activates his effect, as a quick effect you move it over to the next zone it points to, and then turn its attribute into anything you'd like. So when I say original attribute, there are times where I've made Access Code Talker 53, used his effect, and then used his effect, moved over, made it Divine, and now I have an additional pop with Access Code Talker. Our last Link 1 is our Lingy Boy, which he is very sad because he did not eat many traps this weekend. He only ate 1. He likes eating Labyrinth traps, now a single Labyrinth player. For our Link 2s, we have 1 Cybers Wicked, 1 Update Jammer, 1 Splash Mage. All self-explanatory. This card is so underrated versus Fire Kings because she can't be destroyed by battle or card effects, and anything that she points to can't be destroyed by card effects either. So if you build your board up with these 2 zones, you're pretty much playing against Fire Kings for free. Update Jammer comes up against Avermax because if you have it in your field and you have a big monster that has more than 3,000, you just go battle phase, attack the Avermax. This negates his effect when it goes to try to update it or boost your attack, so that way your monster always wins. And then Splash Mage just revives one from the graveyard, defense mode, negates effects. This one gives a double attack. By the way, OCG, Master Duel, it's optional. TCG, it is a mandatory activation. So just as a heads up, and it's not once per turn. Her other effect is if you summon a Cybers to the zone it points to, you banish one from your graveyard, search Cybers tuner. So comes up when you want to go for your Baru Adding-lister. Before you went for Mathematic Sigma, you don't have that anymore. These. Next up we have IP Masquerena. Also really good to stop Fire Kings and whatnot. And lastly, the card that pairs nicely with her SP Little Knight. So she goes nicely with our Firewall combo later on, which we'll get to in a second so I can show you exactly how that works. But the Firewall combo in this deck is insane. I might actually have to put the link for that video in the comment description, that way so if anybody wants to look at it and see how it goes, that way they can look at it and you at their leisure. Next, we have the Kotaker Heatsoul for our Link 3s, Transkotaker, and Dark Templar adding Nestor. These sum up our Link 3s. Quick effect, pay 1,000, draw 1 card, and if your life points are 2,000 or less, you can tag him out in the extra monster zone to summon any Link 3 or lower Cybers from your extra deck. So you can summon now Templar and then bash something else and then keep going. Transkotaker, if it's co-linked, any co-linked monsters can't be targeted by your opponent's effects and gain 500. And you can target any Link 3 Cyberster in your graveyard or lower and summon it to the zone points to. The whole turn you use the effect or Cyber's locked. Don't use him if you're using the SP, unless you're using the SP on your opponent's turn, going first. So that's the only downside. It's like if you make XP, you can't do that effect. And Dark Templar, 3 monsters with different names, which is amazing because tactics, you take your opponent's monster, link it off of this, and you're good. If you summon a monster to the zone of points to, you soul charge the other 2 zones of points to, or if you have infant, you just move it over, now you have 3 zones. And if it destroys a monster in a battle, you target a Cyberse in your graveyard, summon it back to anything that points to. So the soul charge effect is also during the damage step, so you can bring back your level 4 lower adding nesters during the damage step and cause some real shenanigans. Next up for our bosses, we have our Axis Kotaker. This card is so good because it only cares about cards you banished for this activation, not original attributes. So when you move Divine Infant over to make it a Divine, you give yourself another attribute. So you have 7 different attributes technically to banish with this card. And then for our Link 6, which is the just kidding, Firewall Dragon Singularity. So this card is insane. If a card this card points to is sent to the graveyard or destroyed by battle, like the old Firewall, instead of summoning a Cybers from your hand, you target a Cybers in your graveyard and summon it back. Its other effect is, for every card type during the player's turn, you can target cards your opponent controls, up to a number of different card types on your field or in your graveyard, so Synchro, Fusion, Xyz, or Ritual. Doesn't count Link, doesn't count Pendulum. You return them to your opponent's hand, and if you do, he gains 500 for every card you return. So this doesn't count Cybers monsters also, so if you have your Pegasus in your graveyard and you tactic steal like a Zeus or something, now you have 2 cards you can bounce. So that's always a plus with this, and it also comes up in our mid combo, or our big combo at the very end, which I'll put the link for down below for my dueling book replays for it. Lastly, for our extra deck, we have 1 Light Dragon Ignister, which comes up for our I Meet You reveal search if you want to grab Bakari to grab your Reborn spell. And our Wind Pegasus Ignister, which is super mandatory because it allows you to destroy spells and traps your opponent controls, and it also allows you to shuffle cards back. At least 4 duelists I caught off guard with this effect, and they were just blown away by it because they're like, I forgot that card exists. And I'm like, Peggy Ober. For our side deck today, this weekend, we had 3 Nibiru the Primal Being, self-explanatory, cross-out target, stops combo decks. Didn't see against Vanadium. I was a little mad. Wish I did. We have 3 Cosmic Cyclone. That's self-explanatory against Fire King. I mean, you just blast their Fire King Island, it's banished, their whole board dies. I mean, you really want to do it on your turn, that way so they trigger most of their effects. You want to get their effects out of the way, that way you're good. This also stops Anti-Spell Fragrance, because Anti-Spell murders our deck, I should say. So if you get your hands on one of these in your opening hands, you're pretty much golden. I'm considering making this card because this card came out so much. But then again, next format's going to change, so we don't know. Then we had 3 copies of Forbidden Droplets. So Droplet came up quite a few times. I wish it came up more, but at the same time, I'm not sure how I feel about this. It sends the cards from your hand or field to the graveyard to negate cards your opponent controls. So if they SP target your card, you can dodge the SP and negate another card. And because SP doesn't have its one target, it doesn't banish itself. So it sticks around so you can just smack it with a Templar or something. It's also good in damage step, that way so you can have your opponent's attack, and that way you can avoid certain other cards. It's also good with Island, so you can reset the island. And then lastly, we have our 3 copies of Triple Tactics Talent, or Thrust, not Talent. This card searches any of your cards. We have 2 cards you can search off this for our main combo. You have I Meet You can search, and you also have Fighting Spirit you can search to get our recursion back. And then for the cards that I cited for Thrust, we have 1 copy of Soul Release, which for the longest time was honestly a copy of Dimension Shifter because I really didn't like Shifter against me, so I kept Shifter in as a crossout target. But this card only came up in one possible scenario, I didn't even see it, so I was like, okay, this happened. And then the other two cards were Dimensional Barrier, which honestly, the whole weekend, if I could change one thing, it'd be that. I would change this to the Remote Karma Cannon. That way, I'd be able to stop the Vanadium combo from going off. And lastly, Evenly Match, which is an insane blowout. Like, I baited a super heavy Samurai Horus player through all his negates and everything, and I went Thrust Search Evenly, and the guy who was watching behind him, his jaw dropped. I was like, we're good, baby. So, this card is blowout, but my reasoning is Thrust is only as good as the targets you can set or search off it. So it's only realistically good in this deck going second. So if you're gonna play a go second version, I'd consider main decking this card. Yeah, so that was the weekend. I want to give shout outs to all my buddies who helped me play test, all my friends who, helped me borrow cards that I needed to borrow, like my friend Brian, who helped me borrow a copy of Thrust that got me the win. I also want to thank my teammates Noah and Steve for helping me practice and helping me stay on track and helping me step through combos online and figuring out what to do and what not to do. And I'm also, I think that's it.